Okay, well, it's my turn in the hot seat. I'm Claire Beaumont, a partner at Gorvin Solicitors in Stockport, and I'm going to be steering the podcast today. I'm going to be talking to a number of property professionals from across the sector to discuss what the future holds and what it's like for recruiting people at the moment and what challenges we've got in the sector. I want to welcome all the panellists, and if you'd all like to introduce yourselves.
Hi folks, my name's Rob Henderson. I'm the Managing Director of JDA Architects. We're sort of very much focused on care and residential sort of development, and actually more recently in terms of retrofitting as well, which might come up in the conversation, I think. So,
Richard Walters from Broadgrove Planning and Development, a Stockport-based planning consultancy. We're involved in a lot of regeneration and planning regeneration across the UK, but predominantly across the northwest.
Hi, I'm Nigel Blythe, Managing Director of Fairhouse Buckley. We're a firm of chartered surveyors and commercial property specialists based in Stockport. We do a lot of work in the Stockport area on the agency front, but we also do work nationwide for corporate clients as well.
Hi everyone, my name's Tony Houlihan, Lime Property. We're developers and investors. We do a lot of work around the northwest, based in Stockport.
Okay, so we've looked at market demand, design and community engagement. We've looked at some examples of how things have transitioned well from their existing buildings and repurposing successfully. So moving on to a slightly different topic. People, as we've talked about with community engagement, etc., people are so important to us in the property industry, regardless of their people coming to our properties or people advising, etc. People buying them, occupying them, financing them. So how are you finding recruitment in your teams at the moment? Is there any particular barriers or struggles or positives that you're seeing at the moment?
I think it's been really challenging in the property sector as a whole because it traditionally follows the market, and when Lehman Brothers went in 2008 and there was the big property crash and nothing really happened for 5-6 years really. Nobody was going into property at the time, and you've got a skill shortage at a certain sort of level, and I think that's pretty much the same across all disciplines really, because nobody goes into an industry when there's nothing going on in it. So there's been a lot of years where nobody's gone into the profession at all, and there is a skills gap, I think, between old people like me and younger people coming into the profession. Where we've had 5, 6, maybe 7 years of not many people coming into it. So there is a shortage, I think, of certainly in our sector as surveyors, qualified surveyors with post-qualification experience, 3 or 4 years. Not many of those around at the moment. So
the mid-level person who for us can pick up a scheme and go and deliver that. There's plenty of grads coming through, and that's fine. I think people are now returning to the sector, which is interesting. I think COVID had a massive impact. The sort of learning, university learning online must have been a nightmare. I can't even imagine that. So I think a lot of people had the aversion in the architectural world. We're still 7 years. So 7 years of student debts is massive when you're coming out on the other side and not particularly getting the wages of a solicitor or a planning consultant or those sorts of things. So it's sorry, I couldn't help it. But
I thought you were going to stop then on your list.
But yeah, so we've seen that. So we've got quite a lot of people who, as you say, a little older and sort of that associate level. That's fine. Straightforward project architects is a little bit more challenging. We'll be there for a while, I think, as well.
So you're finding it competitive then to secure those new recruits at that level?
It's very competitive in certain areas. It's very difficult to find qualified people who would fit in as well. I mean, it's not just the qualifications. I think it's the individual that will fit into the organisation as well. We're a small company. It's really important that whoever we have coming in fits in with the rest of the team. And that can be quite a challenge. And I think it's just looking at sort of the younger people coming through and the people who have been to university through COVID and coming out into a different environment, their expectations and what they're seeking from their workplace has changed dramatically as well. And going back to what Rob was saying before about how it's very difficult to learn or absorb information when you're working from home is something that's going to take a while to balance back out, because there's more flexible working arrangements coming in as well. I think the law's changing so that people can ask for flexible working pretty much from day one.
We've got expectation now. We've when we were trying to set it at 5 days, everyone's back in. We had a number of people who just sort of went, yeah, that's not for me, that.
We've seen that with requests from graduates prior to any interview wanting to know how many days they can work from home. I mean, fundamentally, as a graduate, you're going in there, you're there to learn. You don't learn from being at home. If you all think back to when you started your careers, learning from those senior people around you, it was invaluable, just picking up things in conversations and being around those people. I struggle to sort of comprehend that anyone wanting to come into a business to get involved, get stuck into that business and learn, wants to sit at home and work from home. But
it's about balance.
It's absolutely about balance.
And we've got a digital age which is always evolving, and giving us the tools to be able to do more from home, different locations, in the office, and it's about finding what's right, I suppose, for your individual who's coming in and your business as well. But it's definitely a challenge to please everyone.
As a priority for a graduate, in terms of those questions, that shows you where the mindset is.
But recruitment consultants are the same, actually, really. The first question we got asked recently was, what's your working from home policy? And it's like, well, we don't really have one. We prefer people to be in the office. Personally, that's how we operate best. But obviously, if you've got a report to do, if you've got something where you need some quiet time, well, working at home is fine. But the issue is one of either flexibility or the expectation that I will work from home for 2 or 3 days, and that's fixed in my contract. And there are a lot of contracts that were entered into. People were employed throughout COVID where they were contractually saying that they would work from home for so many days. That's where it becomes a bit more difficult, because if they don't want to come back in, as an employer, you can't force somebody to come back in, but you might prefer them to be back in for lots of reasons, because it will help them do the job better.
So the point you mentioned about university as well, during COVID, we're quite keen. We're going into the universities. We're trying to give students that opportunity to just come and join us on work experience, to give them that opportunity that they haven't had during COVID. So a lot of the sandwich placements didn't occur, through the COVID period. So people coming out of university, they've not had that sort of hands-on experience of being in the workplace as well. So we're trying to go in and get some of those students early on to give them that opportunity. That's invaluable, because, as you say, when you're interviewing someone at that sort of graduate level or that junior level, yes, the academic side is great, and yes, but actually just being in that environment, it's alien to some of them. So giving them that opportunity, whether that's long term with us or someone else, it just feels like the right thing to do as a small business, because we had those opportunities. I think it's really important, that.
Definitely, and we need young people, don't we?
Absolutely.
So if their expectation has changed and the market is competitive, then potentially, if you can't adapt in your own businesses to their new expectations, somebody else is going to, aren't they?
We're finding that are so much more considered. I don't know, you go back 10 years and people would have snapped your hand off for us the chance for a year out. Now they're sort of very, very calm, very considered. What is the flexible working? Not so much about pay.
It's about the whole package.
Where's the flexibility? Are you investors in people?
Yeah. What's your EDI policies?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your sustainability? How are you helping all
Far
those
more
aspects?
informed questions that we find when we're going through that interview process with them. It's an interview now very much in both ways, as opposed to us just asking the questions. Let's have a quick look at your drawings. That's fine. They're now coming right back at you and saying, okay, where do you see yourself on design quality? Where do you... What's going on? But in fairness, I think that's great. But Nigel and I were chatting a few days ago, and I think their expectation of career is becoming quite different as well. Do people actually aspire to come in to become an equity partner in an architect's practice? Very often we're finding not. They don't want the risk. They don't want the difficulty of that. They actually want to sit and colour in, for most of the time as an architect. And, whereas they want title, that's really important, what we're finding for the younger people. I want to be senior architect. I don't even know what one of those is. And if I do, I might apply. But, but yeah, exactly. Or they want to be project architect. That title seems to be more important to them than aspiring to the equity and sort of that progression, which is quite an interesting change, I think, in the youngsters.
So is it important to find different career routes for people then if they're not aspiring to be equity partners or business owners, so that people can progress through their careers but in a different way in our organisations than they would have done originally. The more conventional sort of routes to retirement are maybe different now. Priorities are different now.
It's easier in a business as well, in a small business, because as you say, the people within your business, they're your biggest assets. So if you've got good people, it's trying to make the best for that, and you've got that flexibility, and you can be agile as a smaller business to do that. And as you say, appraisals, it's creating a different pathway for different individuals, and there's an expectation, I think, for that now. But I think something as a small business that, having worked in some of the big multidisciplinary practices, that perhaps isn't there in those bigger businesses. So it does give the smaller business a bit of an edge there in terms of, again, it's not for everybody, but for certain people, it fits and it works, and it's a really good pathway then, as long as you approach it in that way.
I just wonder how well they're being prepared for working life through the education system and through the university side of things as well, in terms of, what they know is available out there. So when you talk about equity ownership and entrepreneurialism and things like that, the system is generally more producing people who will go to school and then go to university and get a job. And that's a different sort of mindset and a different mentality to somebody that might come out with aspirations of owning something one day and controlling it and running it. So I do wonder how much of that, is being prepared well for them, particularly throughout COVID as well. And I think it's just little things that I've noticed. I mean, I had an application for a job the other day from a graduate, and it was Dear Fairhurst Buckley, riddled with grammar, riddled with spelling mistakes. It was just like, you're never going to get anywhere, applying for a job like that. And that's the one isolated example, so it's not, demonstrative of what's exactly is out there. But it is a little bit alarming, that really, because I did write back to them and just say, I can't do anything for you, but I'll give you a couple of tips.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult to write to a person, to look on the website, to see who it is, and to do a little bit of knowledge about the company, just to introduce yourself to them, and just sort of warm the way in a little bit more.
I think of the professions, the business acumen side of stuff is just non-existent. It's certainly non-existent in architecture school.
Yeah, they don't teach the business side of it. They just teach the technical aspects of it. Yeah,
absolutely. So great. They're going to come out as well. Even then, some on the technical side, probably not so great composition and all those sorts of things. But there should be modules, a lot of modules about owning, running,
Do you think
financial.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Do you think that the sort of apprentice route styles and different routes in? So I know with law, there are now multiple different routes. So you don't now have to go to university, do the standard LPC, do the 2-year training contract. There's different routes to qualify. We'll open it up a little bit more and maybe encourage people who are more entrepreneurial minded or not so as traditionally academic, etc. So you can get a broader
quite new in
spectrum
architecture.
of people.
Mm-hmm.
Only just been introduced in architecture.
Yeah.
The apprenticeships. Because you look at that, people don't want the debt. If I talk to my nieces and nephews or the kids, they're sort of 18 or 30, they're looking at it very, very specifically and saying, I've got 5 years, $9,000, just on tuition fees alone.
Yeah.
I'm 50 grand in debt. Why am I doing that? But hopefully that will allow them to get it through a different route.
It's a good way for a young person to get into a company and see it from all different angles from an early age as well. So in terms of understanding and having more business skills, it's a good opportunity to do that, I would say. And they've got more time to sort of, I guess, develop, than, the expectation of, if you go to university, come in with a degree, there's an expectation that you're going to come in at a certain level. And I remember when I went into my first job as a graduate, I just realised I knew nothing very, very quickly. Yeah. And then it's how you pick it up along the way. And I think, that might have subtly changed a little bit where, there's an expectation that you've got a degree, you know a lot, and you do know a lot of information, but it's how you apply that to the real world, I suppose, really.
How about yourself, Tony? Because that's...
So, interestingly enough, I was just thinking, so obviously I'd say my sector is a little bit less professional, in terms of ways to get there. And there are a lot of SME investors and developers that are very entrepreneurial, all come from different walks of life. I actually started as an apprentice. And I was fortunate enough to be rotated around all the main departments in the business I worked for at the time. That gave me a really good understanding of how the whole business connected to each other. And I obviously apply that in our own businesses. Although they're very small at the minute and don't have a lot of staff, they're all very different in the learning styles, and they've all got different needs and different agendas in terms of, some of them don't want to be CEO. They're just quite happy to come and do a job. Others do want to develop, but they want to develop at the stuff they're interested in. So, I think it's very difficult for an SME employer to be able to offer all that variety for all the different characters you get. But, in property investment and development, there are formal courses, but I tend to find a lot of the people haven't actually been on any of them. There's very few that have got RICS or anything like that. A lot of people go on weekend training courses with like property educators, and the sector in general gets a fair bashing at sometimes, which most of which is justified, if I'm honest. But, there are some good people out there developing people, but the structure and stuff isn't there really. And it'd be interesting to see someone take that on, but I just don't see it coming through the sector at the minute. Sort of SME, you get your big corporate sort of estate management firms and sort of investment firms and stuff like that, and they have programs and stuff, but there's nothing for an SME to tap into. I couldn't send my staff on a formal investment course or an apprenticeship, which would be really useful.
That's a really good point.
I think they can only really learn by watching what's going on.
Doing it.
Yeah. And a lot of people going into, the SME sector, they develop because they make mistakes along the way and they just do it. Mm-hmm. And that's the way you start, and that's how you learn. And if you've got access to capital and you can come and have another go, that's what you need to do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned before that what was helping you was having work experience, and that's also obviously helping the students and the graduates and the people coming into the sector. Has anybody else found anything that's particularly helping them getting over the barriers for recruitment at the moment? Have you tried doing anything differently or something new, or are you still working it out?
We're similar to Richard. You're into the universities quite a bit, but having enough strands in the company to be attractive to somebody in terms of student is, we found to be really, really important. So investors in people. So we're gold now. People will ask that question. What is? Can we see what does that look like? And I think you mentioned it earlier, Rich. Career progression.
Yeah.
So they want to know, where they can get to, what systems have got in place. Have we got platforms? Is it a one-to-one appraisal every year that, we speak about it, we agree, we do nothing about it, and we'll meet next year? They're not interested in that anymore. They want to be able to develop both knowledge and, I think, as I say, perhaps title or position. But all of those sorts of things, we're a little bit out of town centre. I'm just going to come back to geography for a minute. Again, for a lot of these young people who will naturally gravitate to town centre, for them to come back out to Stockport, to Tameside, to Oldham, wherever that might be, it's quite a challenge to become attractive enough for them to go, yeah, I'll jump on the tram, or I'll jump on the train to come out.
Yeah, because people do want to work in Manchester, don't
they?
Yeah,
of course they do.
So, it's only when you've worked there for like 20 years, it's bloody nice to come back out and be able to park outside your office. And
but that excitement and the hustle and the bustle is something that we're going to have to compete with to get there, I think.
In terms of, we talked about that earlier, Tony, you were saying that the amount of apartments that are going up, Capital and Century, it's got the badge, it's got the, well, that's cool. That opportunity is going to be there then for those younger people. If the jobs are there, it's going to help with recruitment. I know, to be fair, one of the reasons we moved into Stockport, we were previously in Chillingham, was that connectivity, not purely, but one of the reasons was to help with recruitment and make it more attractive for that reason. That if we were looking at people who are currently in Manchester, it's very easy then. As you say, it's 10 minutes. You're close to the station, especially with the new walkway down there now. It makes it much easier to recruit. And I think going forward, it's got to help having the ability to, as you say, Rob, you're competing with Manchester.
Yeah, but that's for us as employers, to try and promote that, to try and say, we are as attractive as this, because we can clearly show you how we're more attractive than going into town. look at the coolness of Capital Centre. Look at the nice new apartments. Look at this.
Slightly easier than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Well, that's what that's what I'm saying.
And it's going to get easier. It's got to get easier and better to do.
You're coming full circle, aren't you,
Yeah.
in terms of town centre regeneration and why it's attractive for a young person to live here and work and play. So that all of a sudden that's about storytelling. Perhaps that's what Stockport suffered from slightly. It's the story.
I think whether deliberate, but the whole this conversation has sort of come around that it's sort of full circle there. But back to that regeneration, it just shows that it's not just about the building and the nice new shiny interchange. It's that whole picture. We're talking about recruitment and that's competing with Manchester, and that will help. And I think that's really what regeneration. It's about placemaking. It's not about individual projects. We've talked about that connectivity, recruitment. It's about the whole placemaking process. And I think, to be fair, we're in a fortunate position at the moment where there's a good story to tell around that in Stockport.
Well, I think there is. If you look at some of the outlying towns around Greater Manchester, go to an Oldham, go to perhaps a Denton or to Rochdale. Any of these sorts of places, there's actually real sort of murmurings around Stockport, isn't there? It's good. Things are happening here. There's the coolness of Capital Centre. We've got all of these bars that are sort of opening. Yes, you've got the interchange. Yes, you've got the train station. So actually, perhaps it's sort of the Stockport time of you really being able to push forward.
Tap into
it. Yeah, and so perhaps needs to stick its chest out a bit and actually start really telling that story of why it should be the place that people should come to.
I think now's the time with delivery. Everyone's talked about master plans and things like that over the years, and there's always been we'll believe it when we see it, but it's actually delivering now. And that, as you say, now is the time, I think, off the back of that to shout about it.
Yeah, so I think one of the sort of places I'm sort of looking at and thinking as we're talking about this is Preston. So I say Preston's a bit further ahead than Stockport on that journey, but one of the things that they've really not nailed is getting enough quality office stock. So there's not enough employers in the place. So they've done a lot of residential redevelopment. They've done a lot of regeneration. They made some of the common spaces look really cool, but there's not enough decent employers in the area to attract that mass. And I feel like the exchange is great, but that's not going to fill up that quickly from all the different residential developments. So there still needs to be some push there. And I don't really see where that's coming from at the moment. That's probably one of my slight concerns about what's coming there. I don't know whether you've got any insight on that, Nigel.
From an occupier's perspective.
Yeah.
Well, I think you could say that there's a lot of brownfield land being developed, so lots of businesses coming out of the town centre to make way for the residential. So it is a valid point in terms of where's everybody going to work, because you wouldn't necessarily live in Stockport and then go and commute into Manchester. Mm-hmm. Maybe you would. But yeah, you do need the jobs. You do need the employers.
Where will the value sit, Nigel? Beautiful apartment building, very close to trains. What sort of pictures there from between there and bottom of Deansgate in terms of rental values or affordability for young people? Is it a huge difference?
I think it's quite a bit lower, and I think Stockport's coming from a lower base than a lot of other areas of South Manchester. So that's an attraction for sure in terms of getting people in, and affordability's got to be a big thing, particularly with mortgage rates and everything else. So it's, again, balance, I suppose, really, because if you get that wrong and then everybody pours in and then the prices start rising, then it's not cheap anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I noticed, especially with the apartments, a lot of them are built to rent.
Yeah.
So the build to rent model works over a much longer time frame. They're not building them to sell because at the minute it doesn't stack. Recently looked at a site on Hillgate. I think it's 22 apartments. You just can't get the values that you need to make that development worthwhile. There's not really a lot you can do in that plot of land that's not residential. So it is interesting that's on the top of sort of developers' heads. Obviously, they're doing it to make money. They're not doing it for fun.
We've not even really touched on build costs.
No.
But build cost legislation, green legislation, everything.
And architects and planning consultants.
Fees. But it is, that building inflation that hit 12 months ago, we must have had 4 or 5 schemes that fell over right at the end. Just it no longer stacks because the values didn't keep pace with with inflation, the Building Safety Act's just come in, so all the differences in there does start to sort of really make a difference, I think, in terms of these. You can need to go higher.
Yeah,
it's all
smaller flats.
Yeah,
it's difficult.
It's fine you say smaller flats, but we're all hit with NDSS now.
Yeah,
so we've got to hit certain sizes for apartments that the local authorities are committing to.
And there's also back to the market then, and there's less desire for those small. They want people want that space as well. Yeah. So it's a tough conundrum on sites like that.
Yeah.
Definitely changing times.
But I think we need to be really careful, don't we, about say it's really challenging and the build rates are going up, and I think you can talk yourself back into a recession if we're not really, really careful. So it's I think the politicians will do that for us, but
the press can do that. The press can do that. It's very easy to be negative about it. It's a positive story there.
There's huge opportunities there, and I think unless people are focusing on the positive and focusing on that storytelling and how we can make things work, because otherwise they don't work and we just sit here and don't do anything. There's
still plenty of opportunity. And on the build cost point, just as an example, I am seeing at the lower end of the market on the smaller schemes, I am seeing it come down a little bit more sensible levels.
Yeah.
People are starting to ring you and ask if you've got any jobs coming again, which has got to be a great sign. Because it feels like a bit more sensible out there at the minute, and everyone did their own extension during COVID. There's only so many extensions people can build, so they are coming back to sort of the developers and investors again. Whereas quite happy to do Mrs. Smith's extension and get top whack for it, but now that's not there anymore, and people are being a little bit more sensible about what they're prepared to pay and what viability works.
I think. Last couple of months, or couple of years, I should say, we've also been hit with the administrations. So a number of those mid-level contractors going bump.
Yeah,
that's been difficult to deal with. So it's not typically a man in the van. It's that medium level. It's not the tier ones or even the tier twos. But that gap in the middle is still there. We're finding, so that's where we're finding the prices for builders are still holding. Social housing, care, whatever it might be. That's still increasing quite a lot. So it's still tricky.
Because they're protecting their profit margins probably, so they stay viable.
And well, listen, there's no competition. If you've got a number of those contractors that have gone, they've left quite a big hole for 3 to 10 million quid's worth. That level is where we're seeing still quite uncompetitive rates. People holding themselves.
Interesting.
We'll see. But I think somebody will fill that hole. It's there, so people will just come into it. I think so.
Okay. Well, thanks. That's been a really great debate today. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay,
thank you
very much.
Thank you.